So we have had the absolute pleasure of speaking with Eleanor Oyston from Oncology Massage Global. What really struck me a lot about Eleanor's story is that she basically created the modality of oncology massage, which has been an enormous journey, and it's morphed into something larger and bigger than she had ever imagined. Her love of people, her love of touch, the power of gentle, soft touch really comes through in this interview. And her wise words and her peaceful nature just permeate the entire conversation that we have. What did you love about it, Alicia?
Just her intentionality and her gentleness.
Yeah.
Specifically, there's a moment in the interview, and I'll share this today because it's been a few weeks since we've recorded, and I feel like I can.
Mm.
Um, as she was speaking, she shares a couple of experiences of touch, safe human touch, particularly at end of life. And as she shared, as my brain does, it goes into different situations to help me make sense of it in my own life, to help me make sense of what it's like for someone else. And I realized in the interview, in that moment, that was actually the anniversary of my grandpa passing, and on the day of the interview. And the last time I was with him was in the nursing home holding his hand. I gave him a hand massage because it was about the only thing that he could handle. He didn't know who I was. And I sneakily pulled my mask down. I look up at him and I go, "It's your favorite." And put my mask back on because I'm trying to be keeping him safe. And he just smiled and he rested back in his chair and I massaged his hand. And just that was the last physical contact that I had with my grandpa. And it just reminded me so much of that moment and how powerful and how beautiful and how she has seen how cells react to that. And I thought, I couldn't have a more beautiful experience of the last time that I was able to touch somebody who was so dear to me. And just, yeah, that, so I just loved her whole, everything that she has to say. And specifically that moment in the interview was a little bit tricksy. So if you're watching on YouTube, you might see a few tears that were like, big deep breath, because I couldn't quite talk about that in the interview, but I definitely wanted to be able, I knew that I'd be able to talk about it a couple of weeks later. So as we were putting this together, I'm like, I will share that bit. And I just think she's just incredible.
Yeah, me too. Interestingly, I came into a workspace that I share today, and this lovely little card was on the desk, and it says, "Gentleness is moving wisely, touching softly, holding carefully, speaking quietly, and thinking kindly. When you feel angry or hurt, use your self-control. Instead of harming someone, talk things out peacefully. You're making the world a safer and gentler place."
Which is a gorgeous introduction to Eleanor.
Yeah, it really is. Enjoy.
Hello, Eleanor, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
We are very excited to be interviewing you and speaking with you today. I have had the privilege of meeting you 18 years ago, or seeing you speak, I should say 18 years ago, at the original, very first Massage and Myotherapy conference. And the way I still remember the way you made me and the audience feel in that session. So I'm really honored that you have come and joined us in this today.
Well, thank you. That's a lovely thing to say. So thank you.
So can you share a little bit about your background in the field of oncology, massage therapy, education, and how did you become involved in this area?
I think I've been tap dancing around cancer since I was about 17 when I started work in a hematology laboratory in 1966, which sounds like the middle of the last century when it was all very different then. But anyway, when I had my children, when you're in a wet lab, you have to process the blood. But when you're doing pap smears, then they can wait for another day. The way they're processed is quite different. So I started diagnosing cancer down the microscope when I had my children because it meant I could work regular hours and get home at a reasonable time. So I I have an intimate relationship with cancer cells for a very long period of time. And eventually, in my early 50s, I decided I was sick to death of test tubes and I really wanted to work with people. And I'd had an experience of foot reflexology that made me feel amazing. So I went to massage because there was no science. There's no science for foot reflexology. I mean, well, there is, but not like meridians of energy or anything like that. So I went to massage school to see what they'd done to me, and I didn't leave. So that became my midlife transition from working in a medical laboratory to rubbing bums, as I say. So bottoms is probably a nicer word. And I think I say to people, I think I've done more good as a massage therapist in the last 25 years than I did in the first 25-year career I had being a clever little scientist. So I have great faith in human bodies and their ability to adapt and change to circumstances in which they find themselves. So when I first started massaging, because of that background in science, I was aghast at massage school in 2000 that told me I wasn't allowed to touch anyone that was sick, like heart disease, lung disease, not just cancer. And I just couldn't believe the truth of that, because in fact the opposite is true. Because when people relax and allow the body freedom to do its thing, then the body does wonderful things, and that can be achieved through sport. We create the same endorphins as athletes, and we allow the body to create endorphins of relaxation, and that's positive. So I've probably spent the last 25 years trying to make that happen one way or another. So
It's just incredible. Like that transition from science, test tube into hands-on body work. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like? What was the epiphany for you when you were like, but these people should be touched? Like, can you tell us a bit about that, what that was like, being told that you weren't able to, but just knowing, there was a knowing inside of you that knew that you could touch them and should?
I think it started with my mum. My mum was a little Scottish lady who was as round as she was tall, and she was very, very compassionate, and she was clever. My mum was very clever, but came from a coal mining family, and she was the second eldest, and she had to go to work at 14. That's just what happened in her life. But she brought her compassion and her wisdom about the body into her life. And as a migrant to Australia in the 1950s, all the services were poor. There weren't hospitals, there weren't a lot of doctors, there were certainly no nurses. And I can remember having streams of people through my mother's kitchen, sitting around the kitchen table, and she had remedies galore and they worked. We had poultices on our scratched knees, and we had lemon juice in the morning because you had a funny tummy, and there was just a plethora of things that happened from nature and from her knowing about them. And I think no one came and wasn't helped, and it always ended with a cuddle. So I knew that touch wasn't going to be a negative thing for people. But I think in my personal experience, I had a very stressful job, and I started having acupuncture and then this foot reflexology, and I was astounded at how I changed, how my body, I didn't have a disease that had a label, but my body was really stressed and really stretched. And I always played lots of sport, and I played squash, and I was a swimmer, and so it wasn't lack of exercise, it was just stress. And acupuncture, wow, that blew my socks off. So as soon as I went through massage school, I found a guy who used to run Massage Australia magazine, a guy called Charles Cancella, and he took groups to Beijing. And then, I went I was a very new therapist. I was straight out of massage school. I didn't really know much about anything really. But I went to China with Charles and I just connected with the simplicity of the basic communities. And I think coming from a little village in Scotland, my mum had that basic knowing. And then I found these amazing doctors in Beijing that had that basic knowing. And we didn't do much there. We just warmed the patients up, rubbed their muscles so that the doctors could manipulate them. But I met a guy who had a really severe stroke, and within 8 days they had his arms and leg back, and while working on his speech, and he'd never been hospitalised for a day after he had this major stroke. And I just went, I get it. I know if you keep the body moving, it's designed, the lymph system, the blood system, the neurology of the fascia, the nerves in the fascia are just about movement. And if we keep moving it either passively by massage and Bowen and acupuncture, then we can keep healing happening instead of, stopping everything and putting people in a bed, and anyway, so I'll stop.
It's wonderful. I remember seeing those Beijing trips. I had completely forgotten about them until you mentioned it. So that's incredible.
It was magic. It was really magic. We did qigong under an expressway. We went to dinner with went to lunch with the doctors, and then went to lectures by the professors in the afternoon. And I had RSI from so much writing. It was amazing. I just couldn't get enough of it. And then on the weekends, they took us to the Great Wall and taught us about China. It was a magnificent trip. And one night, I must tell you, one night Charles said, does anyone want to go to the hairdressers? And there were 12 of us in the group. And everyone said, oh, no, thanks, we'll go home to bed. And I said, yeah, I'll have a go. Take me to a hairdresser. And so we went to this hairdresser and she washed my hair without any water in a tap. It was a spray bottle, shampooed, then a spray bottle, and then washed out, pulled out the froth out of my hair with a spray bottle. And at the end of it, she said to Charles, asked Charles, could she please take my picture? And I went, oh, I don't know about that, And then I said, why? Why does she want my picture? And she said, because you're the oldest white person I've ever met. And I was only about 50 then, 55 or something. So it was culturally awakening, as well as even deeper understanding of how healing our bodies can be.
Yeah.
So I don't think anyone's untouchable at any stage of any disease. There's always somewhere where you can lay a healing hand, and hands convey our energy. And if we're touching someone and we're frightened, then that fear touches the other. If we touch someone and we go, I'm here, it's your journey, but I'm here with you, then that's a different level of compassion and touch.
Yeah.
That's so good. I'm curious, sorry, I'm just going to jump in, Alicia.
Yeah.
Curious about when you studied and you heard these people are, let's just call them untouchable.
Yep.
Your brain said, I don't agree. How did you navigate that?
The system.
Yeah. How did you then go, oh, I don't agree?
Well, I taught the massage school that I went to, which was Australian ACT College of Natural Therapy, which was registered with ATMS as an approved teaching institute. I went to their directors, Rod and Joan, a couple who ran it, and asked them if I could write a pathophysiology course, because the reason they didn't let people be touched was that they didn't understand disease. They didn't understand the processes that happened. So I figured if I taught people pathophysiology and taught them about cancer and about heart disease and what happens in diabetes to the pancreas and things like that, then that would begin to ameliorate the fear that people had of touching someone. And there was in our science classes, our textbooks are always 20 to 30 years behind science. They're a long way behind. So people were still being taught that you could spread cancer by rubbing people. And that's a nonsense. Cancer is much more scientific than that. So you can't push it around. It moves around by its own biological processes that are happening in the body. Now, mind you, if you've got a lymph node that's full of cancer cells and you start giving it the elbow and nudging into it, you'll, in a local area, you will spread. There will be a spread into the adjacent connective tissue, the fascia. The cells will go there. But you've got a whole lot of fighter cells, macrophages and histiocytes that'll come and mop it up. I mean, that's what swelling is about. It's a process by which things are mopped up in the body and eliminated. So it's not a good thing. The problem with cancer oncology massage is that you have to untrain remedial massage therapists to be gentle.
Yeah.
And most people have earned their living by not being gentle. Most people have earned their living by getting into the rhomboids and getting into the glutes with deep tissue and trigger point work. So yeah, that's right. The elbows are and we're still teaching that. And look, for young, healthy sports people, absolutely, it works. I'm not anti that kind of massage. What we need to become is mindful. I met a lady recently and she had been undiagnosed for 18 months and she'd had pain for 18 months and she'd been to a physiotherapist and a massage therapist for 18 months and she was undiagnosed of a blood cancer. And she said, how could this happen? And I said, because therapists keep working deeply. And when pain persists, they think they haven't worked deep enough or they haven't done a strong enough exercise or the patient hasn't done their exercises. They've disobeyed the request of the therapist. And it can be a different process in the body. It can be a disease process that is creating persistent pain. And that needs to go for an MRI or a PET scan or a blood test. That needs to go to a doctor. And massage therapists are much more likely to refer to a doctor than physios, in my experience. Because they don't know and they don't understand the pathophysiology and they're willing to pass the person to the person that will help, and that's their GP or their specialist. And before that, there's a lot of leeway where we can do gentle work and create a relaxation response in the body that's far more healing for the suffering than the deep tissue work, depending on what's wrong with the person. Yeah. So
I remember when I was doing craniosacral therapy studies, and the question my lecturer kept asking was, can you do this with any less pressure? And up until that point, I had been a deep tissue remedial therapist, elbows in, foot on the wall, shaking if I need to, get in there.
Yeah.
And it was like, what do you mean? Like shaking my hands out, going, can I do this any less pressure? I'm not even touching them. And she was like, that's right. What can you do by not touching them? It was, there's only, I think, 6 years into my journey. It was like mind blown.
Yeah,
and
it is
common. It's common.
Absolutely. Well, I used to dissect bundles of nerve cells from behind the eye of 8-day-old chicken embryos. like down a microscope, tweezers and, the whole thing, and transfer that little bundle of nerve cells into a petri dish where I put a special chemical in there and it disassociated them. So instead of a little bundle of cells, it was a little family of nerve cells that were hovering around the bottom of the petri dish in lovely, juicy, healthy media. And I know that those cells have this amazing ability to do what they're designed to do biologically. So they were all separated out. They had no attachments to each other. And then they would make their way into a little cluster and they'd get next to the ones that they had to be next to. Not that one, but this one. Not that one. No, this one. It was amazing to watch down the micro. And these were only chicken embryo nerve cells. And when I went on holidays and people had to feed my cells because we kept them alive for several varying periods depending on what we were testing, and I'd go on holidays and I'd come back and I'd say, has Mary been feeding the cells? And she said, yeah, how do you know? I could tell who was feeding them. If Ian fed them, they were cranky and they were all overlapping because he hated that job. If Mary fed them, she loved feeding the little cells. And she just, these were single cells from chickens. It was amazing. So, I just have lived the reality of how magnificent our bodies are at a cellular level. And I think therapists see that, feel that, touch that on every patient, every client that they work with. They know that if they're present, if they're mindful, if they come to stillness before they start, and if they're not working in a mechanical way. We become habitual, and that's not a put down. Goodness knows I've done that. We all have. We've gone, oh yeah, that's Joe Bloggs. We'll just, we saw him last week. He's a sook. We'll just get stuck into him. But if we can not do that, if we can go, oh, here's Joe again this week. I wonder how he's going. What are we going to do for him this week? So then it's a whole different energy that we bring into the treatment room. And that changes everything.
So beautiful. Hearing what these cells do. I'm like, I don't know that you're meant to tear up over cells, and yet.
Yeah. Well, you need to give yourself a big hug and go, well done. Well done, little body.
Little bodies.
Yeah,
so
fabulous. Amazing that we're the processes that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, I've just read different books. I've had different experiences in my life. I've had different interests. So, and people say, well, you know all this. Well, I do know all that, but you know all this. We all bring a wealth of experience. None of us are empty vessels. We all bring belief systems that we've acquired over our life. And many of that started in childhood. Many of that, all that went in with the breast milk. It's our belief systems are neural pathways that we wander down throughout life, and they become our reality. Sorry, that's my other passion. Well, see, I actually believe in spontaneous remission. I worked at the Quest for Life Foundation on cancer programs for 9 years, and I know that what we think and feel changes our body moment by moment. And that's the truth of the human condition. And I know that some people, they get their diagnosis, they've got their MRI and all the tests say they've got cancer. And then 6 months later, they haven't, and they've defied all odds. And in 1994, there was a research paper, a PhD published in America by Carol Hirschberg and Mark Barash, and they researched 6,000 people in America that were given 3 to 6 months to live with cancer, and they didn't die on time. In fact, they went on to live well for 5 years. So this is research. This is not oomy goomy la la. This is real hard research. And they didn't all do the same thing. They didn't all drink carrot juice or their own urine, God forbid. But they didn't all do the same thing. They actually had 4 personal qualities. And this is the 4 C's at the Quest for Love Portrait Kings. And they had 4 personal qualities. And these, who they are, their being changes everything. Not their environment, not their cells, not their food, not their medication, you can have the best treatment and still die. And you can have the worst treatment and still live. So, and that's the reality. And we all know that. I mean, that's what we see in our life around us. Let's not
What
go
are the
there.
4 qualities? Because they kind of cut out just as I think you told us what they were, Ellen.
Well, the 4 C's are regain a sense of control over your response to life. So it's not what's happening, it's what you make of it. Second one is your commitment to living. And your commitment to living has 3 parts. And one of them is forgiveness. It's about being prepared to do whatever it takes to live well now. Not to not die, but to live well now. And the last one is a challenge. You've got to have a reason to live. There's got to be something to live for, and that's called a challenge. And that could be peace. That could be bringing up children. That could be, I met a guy once who his commitment to living became he was, when he got diagnosed, he was running his father's factory. And then when he did the Quest for Life program, he decided that he really wanted to be a fisherman on the Great Barrier Reef and bought himself a boat. And instead of dying 6 months later, I think he died of something else other than cancer 9 years later, So he followed his dream, and that's what we need to do for those good juices to be produced. So commitment to living, regain a sense of control, challenge in your life, and there's another one, but it'll come to me. It'll come, if we're meant to talk about it, it'll come to me. So the qualities that are about defining who we are and knowing who we are, and we find that through meditation. We find that through stillness, not the frenetic pace that we live our lives busily going here and there. Well, it comes from the inside out in the stillness of the moment. And that's what I learned being at the Quest for Life, because I wasn't a fan of meditation, I have to say, when I went there. But I became devoted to meditation and stillness. It's the answer to peace of mind. Yeah.
I think I'm thinking of therapists that are listening to this podcast and thinking about, can you explain to a therapist who has no experience of oncology massage what the essence of it is? I think you just explained it, but
I think you all have, therapists are taught amazing techniques where they can connect with the suffering of another. But there is a complexity when people are physically, systemically unwell. And it's not just cancer, it's heart disease and diabetes and neurodegenerative disorder. And there is an epidemic of neurodegenerative disorder. And that's because we live on a toxic planet. You can't take cancer personally. It's actually because we live on a toxic planet. And that's our lot. What didn't want to suffer needed to go to another planet. The suffering's on planet Earth. And how do I explain the difference? It's about what we do with musculoskeletal massage is that we fix it, change it, and make it better. So if someone comes in with a sore shoulder, we've got a whole kit bag of techniques that we can apply to that particular shoulder. And with a bit of luck, it'll give them some relief from their suffering. When people come and they've got cancer, depending on the stage of from diagnosis to the end of their life, assuming that they're not cured in the meantime, because 20 years ago when I diagnosed cancer, there was no chemotherapy. They didn't have chemotherapy. They just had radiation and surgery. So, they cut things out and send people home. And I had a client who was 85, and I did it. She was my guinea pig when I was learning. I had an old lady, a middle-aged lady, and a young lady who used to come to me every week so I could practice what I learned in massage school on these three gorgeous people. And my older lady, I said, can I try Bowen on you? And she said, oh, sure, I'll have a go of anything, really. And I did a Bowen treatment. And then she rang me half an hour later and said, the pain's back. And I said, what pain? And she said, the pain I had when I had transverse colon cancer. Now, that wasn't even on her intake form. She hadn't even told me she had a history of cancer. And I said, well, my textbook says just drink water. And I said, tell me what happened. And she said, well, the surgeon just took out my colon, transverse colon, now this big lump of a colon, and said, just go home now and take as good care of yourself as you do of everybody else and you'll be fine. That was her experience of cancer. It wasn't, oh my God, you're going to die of this or you've got to have chemo or radiation. It was just take good care of yourself. We got it all. We got the bit we needed to get out. Whereas now, anyway, I've digressed. But what do therapists need to know? Therapists need to know that they need to be gentle and they need to be aware of quadrants of the body in which lymph nodes are compromised. You take out one lymph node and you can throw up a lymphedema. One. Not an axilla full of lymph nodes. They don't do that as much anymore. But, 20 years ago, that's what happened. They went in and they took all the lymph nodes and the breasts and whatever else they felt they could remove. I used to say if men got as much testicular cancer as women get breast cancer, we'd have a whole different attitude towards how we would treat it. And guess what? We have. And guess what? Testicular cancer or prostate cancer is now very prevalent compared to what it was 20 years ago. So, things are changing, thank goodness. But massage therapists can bring tremendous relief. The other thing is what you say to someone that's sick, systemically sick, life-changingly sick, is really, really important. So you can think whatever you like, but you have to be very careful what you say. And because what you say affects not only the patient or the client you're working with, but they take whatever you say back to their doctor, back to their nurse, back to their next door neighbour, and it becomes your truth. Becomes what they made of what you said is, the gospel according to Eleanor is. And that might have been just a one-liner. That might have been out of my nervousness or my lack of observation of what I was about to say. It isn't the truth of who I am or what I do, what I offer. So you have to be really aware of who you are in relation to the other. And quite frankly, we all have belief systems around cancer that aren't necessarily true, the truth of it. So as I said to you before, I believe that every cell has the potential to heal, and our job is to find the environment in which that can happen. That's my fundamental belief. So that's why I believe in spontaneous remission. Anything's possible with a human body and an amazing mind that we have. But if you had an aunt die or a mother die of cancer when you were a child, you might have a completely different opinion cancer, of the word cancer, and what will happen or what that will mean. And when you haven't come to terms with that within yourself, you transfer that to your clients. So, and you know, I met a doctor in the Netherlands. I had we were running courses. I was running courses in the Netherlands, and I had very enthusiastic therapists there who desperately wanted to get it into the local hospital. So we did a whole lot of work together with that. And because we had a free day, she said, I want you to meet this doctor. He's on television all the time. The government has just given him so many $1 million to build a hospital to look at researching complementary medicine techniques like drinking your own urine and all the wacky way out stuff, right? And I said, oh, that sounds like fun. So we drove halfway across the Netherlands to this, you know, council house with no furniture except beanbags. My husband's very tall and very stiff. He found it very difficult to sit on the floor for a couple of hours while I chatted to this doctor. And, you know, he said things like, oh, it can't possibly be the food they eat. It can't be the food. Oh, okay. It can't be the food. Oh, no, it can't be the water. No, that won't that wouldn't give people cancer, you know. He went through everything I believed in, everything, and poo-hooed it all. You know, because I believe in healthy eating. I believe in filtered water. I believe, you know, I'm not neurotic about any of it, but I fundamentally, we can keep ourselves a little bit safer. And he just threw it all in the garbage bin, you know, and I was sitting there going, oh, that's interesting. Tell me why you think that. And he did. He had this research and he had all these scientific stuff. And before we left, I said, so what are you going to do can I put massage into your hospital? He said, oh, no, that won't make any difference. He knew nothing about what I do. And he was not 1 ounce of curiosity. He wasn't the least bit curious of what would bring a little old lady from Australia to teach in the Netherlands, earning nothing and paying for everything by my gorgeous husband, who's been a benefactor for 25 years. He was not even curious. And he was going to set up, you know, the latest and greatest hospital to look at complementary medicine. And I don't see how you can do that without massage, because it's fundamental. You cannot live without touch.
Yeah.
Babies die if you don't touch them.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like, so anyway.
Yeah.
So I've come across some really interesting people. So the occasional therapist that says to me, you know, oh, I don't believe that what you do works. Well, that's up to them. But when people go to sleep on your table, that's the best compliment you could ever have.
Yeah.
Is that you create an environment that's safe, that they can let go of life and drift into peace.
Yeah. Eleanor, would there be a couple of really simple ways that you would recommend people could communicate more effectively with somebody that's living with something like a cancer diagnosis, when we're used to that 3 sessions approach of I can help fix it? That's not the language I would use, but you know what we're taught, we can fix it. What are some really helpful ways that we might have some basic conversations around that? Maybe what not to say, but what we could say instead might be helpful as well.
Yeah. I notice, I imagine, I feel. Simple formula. I notice you've been diagnosed with breast cancer. I imagine that might be challenging for you. Would you like to talk about it?
Oh.
And then leave it with them. Let them decide what they want to say and how much they want to say. And it's about not having an opinion about what their choices are. So if they say, look, I'm going to stop this chemo because I'm so sick, that's interesting. Be curious. Be curious. Interesting. It's interesting that you feel that way. I wonder if you've spoken with your doctor. You know, it's like, it's about gentleness and not having an opinion. But if you are going, oh, I'd never have chemo, I'd never have chemo, I'd say you've never had cancer, you've never had cancer. You know, because you don't know what you'll do until you do. You know, and my story, my personal story, is that 4 years ago I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, which is a disease of the cells that make my serum, the bit that all the blood floats in. You can't live without it. I didn't pick something that could be fixed easily or that wouldn't do me any harm. You know, my body threw up something that, my goodness, this is pretty scary. This is scary. And for 12 months, I did exactly what the hematologist told me to do. I did not take one supplement. I had some Reiki because my friend's a Reiki master and we couldn't resist because it made me feel so much better. But I didn't follow my belief system. I did as I was told. And at the end of that 12 months, I found another hematologist that believed in complementary medicine. And together with the naturopath, I started using supplements. And I started having, well, I had massage, but by then I was able to tolerate it. But for a long time, I couldn't tolerate that level of touch. Reiki was about as good as I could get. But as soon as I was able to tolerate the most gentle touch, I started having massage. Now, I went to the hematologist 3 weeks ago, the lovely one that embraces complementary medicine. And I said, you know, I was supposed to be dead by now. I was only given 3 years and it's 4. And, you know, 3 to 5. And will I get to 5? And she said, oh my God, you won't die of this disease. It's incurable. It's an incurable cancer by the medical world. But I found a doctor in Melbourne who runs hematology research. And I listened to his podcasts, and at the end of every podcast, he ended up with, this is nearly curable. We're getting really close, you know? So, of course, I set up a Zoom meeting with him, a medical consult with him. I wanted to pick his brains. I wanted to know why he thought that. So it's about curiosity and not feeling that you're right, that you've got all the answers. You know how to make God laugh? Tell him your plans, you know? It's as easy as that, really. And if therapists can actually do courses like Oncology Massage Global online, we taught it in Spain and in Argentina and now in Australia. It's readily available. The information is readily available. And, you know, the teachers that are running training programs in Australia are so good. They're brilliant. And they've got a wealth of experience that they are willing to share. And you know, unfortunately, we don't have an Iris Foundation, Christine. We actually have to earn a living. And and sadly, you know, we need to put food on the table. So people have to pay for their courses, and we don't have philanthropy like they do in America. So we've just got to slog it out, unfortunately. But massage therapists have very, very powerful roles to play in our medical model.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned your training. Can you flesh that out a bit? Because Oncology Massage Global, am I right in thinking everything is online with
Yes, yeah,
yeah,
everything's online. Yes. We've
yeah.
turned ourselves inside out because there has to remain a registered training organisation with the Society for Oncology Massage USA. You have to have checks and all kinds of things. You've got to have a whole process that I know very little about, but it sounds rigorous to me. That and Kate Butler is the person that has developed that program in conjunction with a woman called Jodie Lawler. And Jodie was a immunologist who spent her career with IP Australia, Intellectual Property Australia, and she taught intellectual property theory and practice to third world countries by online, by developing all of these processes. So she retired from her real job and she came to work with us, and she's just created the most amazing course. And it's very transferable into other languages, and and it's readily accessible. And we hope it's close to affordable, that people can afford to do it. But it's the same course content as Oncology Massage Limited and the Institute of Oncology Massage. I trained them all. They found me 20 years ago, and they joined, and they've grown into this amazing. Like, it's when you go, when you pull over by the side of the highway, there's a Hungry Jack's and there's a McDonald's and there's they're all there together because we all want different things. We're all looking for different things when we're hungry. And it's the same with knowledge. When we're hungry for knowledge, the more opportunities there are to learn from different people in different ways, the more people we're going to influence, and ideas are going to percolate and change in our culture, in the culture. So we're all there together. And it's with any training organisation in massage. We need to stand together, and we need to put forward a united front towards that. As I said, the AMA is the strongest union on the planet, and they're not about to let us have much ground. We're going to have to prove it. We're going to have to prove ourselves. But what we've got happening here is that clients and patients are making the change because they're paying for it, and the government's not going to take over anything that's already been paid for by somebody else. So it's unlikely that we will have government subsidies, but if they could wake up in time and we could have that level of support for our industry, it would be a tremendous boost to the medical model. And every time I've been in a hospital, working on patients in a hospital, I've been asked by staff, when can I massage them? Where can I go? Where can they go to get that their patient's getting? And in the Austin hospital, when I started training there, I said I put up 2 massage spots, 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock on Thursday and Friday of each week we were there. And I didn't want nurses with bad backs. I wanted accountants and heads of department and doctors. And the very last one I did was the CEO of the hospital. And he arrived, and he didn't ask me about oncology massage at all. He already had regular massage for his shoulder and neck problems. He believed in it. What he wanted to know was all about my research work that I'd done, whether my background was real. Like, who was I? Had I really worked at the John Curtin School? Did I really know about monoclonal antibodies? Did I, I was cross-examined. And, I came out of it going, oh my gosh, that's like I had a vacuum cleaner on my brain, but what they just want to take really good care of their patients. They want to maintain their status in the community. This is why it's so hard for doctors from overseas to become registered here. It's about quality of care for you and me. And in that way, we'll have to keep slogging away a bit longer to get change, to bring about change in attitudes towards us. But it's coming. It's absolutely coming. Big hospitals have got therapists. And I've kept telling them that they needed what they needed. I love that. I tell them what they need. They need to be developing training programs so that the O'Brien Lifehouse in Sydney trains every massage therapist in New South Wales. The Austin in Melbourne trains every massage therapist in Victoria. The Royal Adelaide Hospital trains every massage therapist in Adelaide. So there's a regional responsibility, and there's a caring that we're looking after the therapists that are looking after our patients. So, I've got a million ideas and about a million visions of what I think is possible in our complementary medical community. So.
Yes, so much scrutiny in terms of training, online, which I am a huge advocate for, um, and also the scrutiny. What I heard earlier was of the actual patients, and then the retelling of the care they've received from an oncology massage therapist and how that in itself is scrutinized. The words that come out of our mouth, every single factor, every single connection we have, either with a patient or medical practitioner, the community at large is under scrutiny in some way. How we're trained, how we're educated, what our backgrounds are, what our belief systems are,
who we are as people,
who we are, who we be. Yeah.
Who we be. Yeah. And that's under the spotlight every time we see someone that, so it's an interesting time. And it's a time of transition in so many, sorry about my phone, a time of transition for so many parts of our culture that it's almost scary because everything's moving so quickly and there's so much technology and there's, God forbid, AI, it's all happening. And we aren't technological. We're kinesthetic learners. We touch it, we feel it, we know it. And that's very hard to convey in a world that is going faster than the speed of sound with both hands typing. It's not who we are. And that was the absolute best thing because, I was there. I was up there with all the technology, with all the stuff. And, I suddenly went, oh, I found my tribe. Like these are people that think like me, that feel like me, that speak the truth that as I see it. So it's a completely different paradigm. And people have said to me, wiser people than me have said, never the twain shall meet. Well, I don't believe that. I believe that we need to meet. We need to be there for each other. And we need to understand the other. And we can only do that with curiosity. So we can only be curious about what they want to know about us, curious about what we know about them, curious what the patients feel and think, curious about cancer, curious about neurodegenerative disease. And, what does it feel like for you to be in a body that's not working anymore? What does it feel like? And how much grief must there be in a person who's broken and at the end of their life? One of the most amazing things is that when you actually massage someone right at the end of their life, you can really change the biology. And one quick story is that I had a client who had a brain tumor and she was a mathematician. And she also was a gymnastics judge. I had a quick mind and amazing woman. And she'd been coming to me for about 6 months at the end of her life. And to her annoyance, her husband used to drive her to me because she couldn't drive anymore. And he hated it. He was grumpy. He thought it was such a waste of money. And, they're not fixed. She's not fixing you. She's not making you better. No, I wasn't. But for an hour a week, I was with her in her suffering. And most people didn't want to be anywhere near that suffering, especially the people that loved her the most, because that meant they had to say goodbye. So we had this, I can never forget our time together over that 6 months. And right at the end of her life, the day she died, actually, her daughters had all come. She had 3 daughters. They'd all come from around Australia and around the world to be with her. And one of them rang me up and said, Mum started having fits, and we can't seem to stop them, and the doctor doesn't have any answers. And can you come? So I went, of course I can come. If nothing else, I can put my hands on you, the daughters who were all needing a good shoulder rub. Anyway, I arrived and she was fitting unpleasantly and really distressing for the family. And I literally did a 10-minute massage between her knee and her upper thigh on both legs. And then I massaged her head as gently as I possibly could. And she wasn't fitting. She stopped fitting, completely still, peacefully lying in the bed. So I said, you all saw what I've done. You can do the same. She will love to have your hands on her, whatever you're able to give her. Just put your hands on her. And the daughter rang me the next morning and told me that her mother had died at 3 o'clock in the morning without another fit. Peaceful. Now, what was that? What was that? I've got no idea biologically what happened. What I do know emotionally is that it was the gift of love that changed everything, and touching somebody at that stage of their life is profoundly loving. And it's a great gift to the therapist as well as to the person who receives. So I don't know. I can't remember your question, Christine. I just went back to that moment in my life, which was, I wanted to run out and massage every person with a brain tumour, or I wanted to run out and arrange for every person with a brain tumour to have a massage therapist trained in oncology massage. Just for that moment, just for those moments. And then there's the patient that's just been diagnosed, and they're in shock. It takes 6 weeks for someone to go, heck, it was me, I've got cancer. How did that happen? What am I going to do about it? And that 6 weeks time, they don't hear anything. They don't hear, they're in shock. They don't hear anything other than, oh, he said that the doctor said this, or she, the doctor, said that, and I've got to do as I'm told, or there's the whole lot of emotional turmoil that has to pass before they can get to the point of going, yeah, I will read that internet. I will talk to that person. I will, and the medical world now says, don't look at what's online. And I totally agree. I had one session online, 1 hour on looking online what was there when I was diagnosed. And I go, God, I'm not going there again. They're just going to fill me up with all the negatives that they possibly can. So, I'll go with the flow and I'll get around to finding things out when I'm good and ready, So, because, most people diagnosed with cancer don't even feel sick. I even had a compression fracture in my spine and I had a bit of a backache. Thought I must have pulled a bit of a muscle, have a bit of Bowen. I didn't think that I had a compression fracture in my spine. I was fine, So you've got all this to get through before. And there, as a massage therapist, I'd never recommend anyone only do oncology massage.
Yeah.
It's got to be a balanced clinical practice.
Yep.
So you have your your bad backs and your sore shoulders and your aching hips and things, and you have your cancer clients, but you don't have a full dance card of people with cancer, because you begin to think the whole world's sick, and it's not. The whole world's pretty wonderful, and most people are doing pretty well. And these days, most people recover from cancer. It's not a death sentence like it was 25 years ago. So there's a whole new genre for us to learn about, and we can need to bring our skills into line with people who have a history of cancer, not just in treatment of it, but they're living well with it. And how do we make that work for them and not hurt them, not put our elbows in? I just feel really blessed. I just feel, how did this happen to me? This is amazing. And at the conference, I spent a fair bit of time yakking away with John Adams and talking about his kids. He always wants to talk to me about his teenagers. I don't think there's anyone in his life that wants to listen, but he's, and I just am astounded at the people that are drawn, the caliber of people. That conference, weren't they superb? When you just listen to their conversation, just not listen to them, but overhear a few conversations. They're just tremendously wise and caring people. It's just, I feel really blessed. And I might have missed out on this. I might have, look, if I'd stayed in that research lab, hanging on to my pension, what a different life I would have had.
One of those sliding doors moments.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Eleanor, I want to say thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your stories. Thank you for your open heart, for the compassion and the love that you have for everything you do, for what you teach, but also just your willingness to share so beautifully with us today. I feel incredibly blessed to be able to hear your story and hear the way that you see and experience and feel life. So thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing and journeying with that with us on that today.
Thank you. And I'd really like to encourage people to do the oncology massage. It doesn't matter who you do it with. Doesn't matter where you just learn the principles of oncology massage, and then you'll be safe. You'll be safe. Your clients will be safe. Yeah, because you're as important as your clients, of course.
Thank you so much for sharing all of your lovely wisdom and knowledge and stories with us. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, Christine. It was fun. I've had fun. I hope you have.